exceed that amount, which is about $1.5 million a year.
So, Jillian, any idea, and I may have caught you off guard, thank you for that answer, any idea roughly how many are on the waiting list currently, through you, Mr. Chairman? Just even a range, roughly?
Through the chair, I'm sorry, Councillor Jackson, but I don't have that information, but I can certainly get it to you.
Okay, that'd be great. And so it's part of overall a $1.5 million program. I know, Jillian, in the past, Mr. Chairman, I have, working through you and your great staff, primarily Dave Brodati, I've forwarded on some seniors, especially those that are widowers that don't want to be institutionalized, want to stay in their homes till the good Lord takes them home. And I have found from time to time I've run into either a financial roadblock based on your cap every year and or through some administrative application difficulties for the seniors who have applied and then have often called my office to assist them. And when I've called Dave and staff, they've been very helpful that way. So can you explain to me, is there a legal cap on the amount of money that you can distribute every year, or is that an internal policy matter? Mr. Chairman, through you to Jillian for an explanation, please.
Through the chair, when we get the investment in affordable housing, we develop a plan, and the investment in affordable housing program is broken down into 4 areas. Ontario Renovates is one of them. There's also housing allowances and affordable home ownership, and lastly, the development of new affordable housing in Hamilton. And so what we do is we develop a plan and we present that plan to council so that the funding is divided up 4 ways.
Okay, so staying with the Ontario Renovates, Jillian, and you'll find out roughly how many are on the waiting list. So for the sake of argument here, hypothetically, if you had 50 individual locations across the city on the waiting list, you would only have funding, let's say, for 10 of those 50 in a given year? Mr. Chairman, through you to Jillian, just help me further understand that, please.
Chair, it really depends upon the amount of funding that the person requires. There is a ceiling, and I'm sorry I don't have that information in front of me right now, but I'd be happy to get it to you. So there is a maximum amount that each household can get, and it's based on the requirements that they have in their own home, the repairs that they require in their own home, of course. And also there is a disabled portion of that as well for people to get retrofit due to disabilities.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, I don't want to monopolize the time here, but I guess, again, Jillian, I've just, the difficulty and a little bit of frustration I've had is that when I've had a particular constituent in need who has qualified, and your staff have been very helpful, and then your staff have said, all the money's used up this year, Councillor, we'll have to wait for next year. If we get some more funding, you might have to wait years down the road. If we get more funding, of course, many of my constituents that are applying, Mr. Chairman, are at that age where a few more years down the road, you know, if they're blessed, may be there, may not be there. So maybe, Mr. Chairman, can we just maybe, Jillian, possibly have a little more of a thorough report back on your waiting list, how the dollars are distributed each year, who can qualify, who doesn't? Is that, Mr. Chairman, through you to Jillian, with your concurrence, Mr. Chairman, is that possible, Jillian, please?
I think I heard Jillian already said there's no problem to bring that information back. Okay. And just to remind our good councillor, it is an Ontario program. All we do is administrate that program.
Right. Okay, but thank you, Mr. Chairman, but I believe our staff are the ones who go through the paperwork and the process, and then afterwards, they're the ones who say that, look, Councillor, there's no money left, or the money has been already earmarked. And so I'm just trying to understand if there's a waiting list indefinitely. I'm trying to address the waiting list, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Jillian for a comment.
Through the chair, we'd be happy to do a report. We could even do it through an email, should you prefer, telling you, explaining to you the amount that was allocated in 2014, our eligibility criteria, as well as where we are in 2015.
Mr. Chairman, if it becomes a motion from this committee politically, if where you're going is to ask the province for additional funds to address and accelerate the waiting list, I'm on for that. But either I can refer this report back to have it, to have more information added, or we can do the email. I'll leave it to my colleagues.
Could I suggest...
but I just don't want to lose track of this.
No, I think you raise a very interesting point, because one of the things we do is advocate. If we have the means, that's what we're here for. We can ask Jillian to actually bring that report back here. I would prefer it that way. That way we can have a discussion and actually have viewers participate through delegation or through just watching on stream the discussions taking place, and hopefully come up with a resolution or a motion at that point.
Mr. Chairman, I'll take your direction. I really appreciate that, pending my colleagues' comments. Thank you, Jillian. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just wondering, and I'm curious, although this one is administrated outside of the city, how does this compare to programs that have been so eloquently written about in our policy for the Homelessness and Housing Action Strategy Plan? Are there comparable programs, and are there comparable funding models that we might have a better direct access to?
Chair, certainly the renovation and retrofit of houses for low-income households is considered a priority in the Housing and Homelessness Action Plan. This program was previously called RAP, and it is the only program of this sort in Hamilton that offers a forgivable loan for household repairs for low-income households. Although there is another program, I'm not sure if it still is in operation, through the Neighborhood Action Strategy as well.
So just for clarity, Mr. Chair, through you to Ms. Hendries, is this the program that is referred to? I think it might be 4.1 in the action strategy. That is that, or is there another program that's written about in the Homelessness and Housing Action Strategy Plan?
We were certainly referring to this as being one of the targets in the Housing and Homelessness Action Plan, to increase the funding so that we can increase the amount of household repairs and people who are able to stay in their own homes.
And I say that, Mr. Chair, because I think some of the confusion which has been relayed and communicated to me in the community is that when we have the conversation about this beautiful plan that we have, the disconnect is often in how we're able to fund it. And so I'm certainly in support of anything that my good councillor colleague Jackson has that would advocate for increased funding, acknowledging the gaps, Mr. Chair, in that continuum between owning a home and being in a precarious situation. So I think something that is incumbent on us to certainly highlight and perhaps better advocate for with that regard, to make sure that people who are one mortgage payment or one leaky roof away from from being precarious are better supported, be they seniors or just low income, working folks who are trying to get by. So I'm hopeful to see some real dollars go behind these beautiful policies that we have in place. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any further comments? Seeing none, I would ask Councillor Jackson at this point to make it formal by moving the motion to have that report come back here.
Okay, so, Mr. Chairman, if you want, Jillian, your recommendation today is basically just to acknowledge setting up a reserve account, correct? I'm happy to move that to get that adopted, Mr. Chairman, with the follow-up report to come back to committee. Everything Jillian understands what we need. How's that, Mr. Chairman?
Okay, so we'll formalize the bringing back the statistical information in regards to waiting list and times,
and dollars available. And Thank you. I'll move that, seconded by Councillor Green. Thank you.
Clerk, do you have all that? Second by Councillor Green. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favour? Any opposed? Carried.
And I'll move 5.5 then to set up the reserve account.
Moved by Councillor Jackson, second by Councillor Green to set up the reserve account. All those in favour? Any opposed? Carried. 5.6. Is there any discussion on item 5.6, Social Housing Capital Reserve Fund, City Housing of Hamilton, 405 York Boulevard? Moved by Councillor Green, second by Councillor Duval. All those in favour? Any opposed? Carried. 5.7. Is there any discussion on items 5.7, Neighborhood Action Strategy, Small Grants Funding? Councillor Green.
I'm just looking at the words affected 2 and 8. If they just want to maybe have staff expand on that a little bit, just for the folks that are following along in terms of that need there.
Susan?
Yep. Through you, Chair, I'd just like to clarify that the other neighborhoods already have that funding through the Hamilton Community Foundation, so the neighborhoods that we're recommending are in those wards that currently don't have funding.
Happy to move it at the appropriate time, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Moved by Councillor Green, second by Councillor Partridge. All those in favour? Any opposed? Carried. 5.8, is there any discussion on item 5.8, Community Heat Response Plan? Moved by Councillor Green, second by Councillor DeVell. To receive. All those in favour? Any opposed? Carried. We're at the public hearings and delegations component. We did have the cancellation with Mr. Francesco. So currently, item 6.2 is a delegation from Robert Manley respecting transparency and accountability of access to housing. So is Mr. Manley in the House? Come on up. Up here, yes. This mic right here.
Hello, Your Honors. I wasn't sure if it was Mr. Mayor or not. My name is Robert Manley, and the purpose of this presentation is to demonstrate that access to housing is not accountable and is not transparent. Access to housing makes filing errors, does not follow procedures, and is surrounded by a shroud of secrecy. Background. My career is being a computer programmer, and I have been, sorry, it's hard to read in here, forced into an early retirement due to disability. I'm mentioning this to demonstrate that I'm able to distinguish the difference between anomalies and statistically significant events. During this presentation, I will mention transitions to homes, which is part of Wesley Urban Ministries. At no time am I saying anything against them. They continue to provide me with food, shelter, and recreation. They have also supplied me with application assistance for both disability and access to housing. T-H will only be mentioned to define my homeless status, proof of proper filing of access to housing paperwork, and I made a mistake here. I suppose I only did it once because ATH and TDH are so close. TDH does keep these on file and has faxing proofs of this paperwork. And to show this, and I'm also mentioning them to show that the secrecy is even continues to be in place with councillors who are there to advise us and help us. They are unaware of a lot of the rules and the way that access to housing is handled. I am defined as homeless. I live in transitional housing under access to housing guidelines. This qualifies me as homeless, giving me the same priority to rent geared to income housing as a person living in a shelter or on a street. There is good reason for this, as these homes consist of 4 units where people have been taken out of shelters and placed together. As would be expected, hard drug usage, hygiene, bed bugs, and a heavy flow of traffic are among the ongoing issues. This is not a complaint, but an explanation of the designation of my homeless status. Original events of discontention. I applied to access to housing in April of 2003 as homeless. These forms were completed and faxed with the aid of a transitional homes worker. During the application process, I encouraged at least 5 others that were co-residents with me at the Salvation Army to apply as well. When I applied for disability, I was asked to fill out forms for ATH to state my disability status, as this would increase my likelihood of obtaining housing. I received transitional temporary housing in June of 2013. At this time, my ATH worker faxed ATH, I need to get these wrong, requested paperwork for my new address. This paperwork was mailed to my new address by ATH. Within 6 months, the people that applied with me had received permanent residences, with 4 of the 5 receiving addresses to which I had applied. When a year of their application date, roughly the same as mine, both of the tenants of my transitional home had received permanent housing. Again, I applied to these addresses as well. I visited Access to Housing in August to see why things were moving so slowly, and they showed my file as inactive and that I was living at the Salvation Army. My file was closed as I did not return forms mailed to the Salvation Army. 8AH had sent forms to my new address, my new address since then. They knew my worker was Monica Heineck and showed that I was receiving rent geared to income for transitional homing at my new address. I stated that this was ridiculous, and the front desk staff shrugged their shoulders and said, "I guess you fell through the cracks." I said, this is a gross paperwork error which does not even make sense. They did backdate my file. I made an appointment with the transition to home manager to get a better understanding of what was going on. When I explained the discharging my file, she explained, "Oh, you fall through the cracks." I've heard this expression so many times that it's obviously an ongoing issue. Councillors will agree with me that they see inconsistencies in the wait list of accessing the housing, but they are not willing to admit this in front of their peers. When I inquired as to the prioritization of the selection process, application date versus disabilities, workers could not give me an answer. So in November 2015, I approached City Hall. I was granted a meeting at the council chambers with my alderman, T2H and ADH. This meeting was in regard to grievances I'd filed with aldermen in regard to ADH procedures. The Access Housing Manager did not show up. This is to show lack of accountability and transparency. When I inquired why, the city manager said that they thought it was a problem with T2H. I asked many questions, and every question was answered by the housing managers. I will have to look into this and get back to you. Why would the housing manager not be aware of these procedures? Who discusses the terms of their contractual obligation to the city? The one thing they did answer is that the other people that acquired residences ahead of me did so because of mental issues escalating their priority. This is not true and is an important part of this presentation. I received a follow-up letter that stated the waiting list is long. This in no way reflects any of the many questions that I asked during our interview. I then returned to ADH office and inquired about the nature of my status. They showed me as applying to 2 addresses with 1 bedroom only. I had applied to about 7 addresses with 1 bedroom and bachelor apartments. Again, if I did not follow up, revealing another paperwork error, I would have been waiting forever on an error-prone system. January 2015 meeting. I then recontacted City Hall and asked to present to the mayor of the problems. I was granted a second meeting to see, but I agreed to have a second meeting with housing to see if these problems could be resolved. When I showed up again, no one was present from ATH. Therefore, nothing concrete could be established. At this time, they told me that only battered men and women were given any priority over homeless, when previously I'd been told that it's disability, it's not disability, it's mental disability. Okay, this does not make any sense, as we are asked to apply for this. This also contributes to lack of transparency, including professionals with the industry. During this meeting, I quoted the ATH website that says 1 in 5 applicants are given homeless priority during the selection process. They said no, it was 1 in 10. Again, this is established as poor paperwork and the lack of following documented procedures. I also asked which units are seniors 55 and which are 60, and have not received an answer to date. So I went on the internet yesterday and looked that up. It's true I could find, and I was told that at 55 Park or 155 Park, there are units for people that are 55, bachelors only. I asked to apply to those and was refused because I wasn't 60. This is another example of the paperwork being wrong. Okay. I did ask, and they said it would be repaired, that there was no process, there was no markings on the forms for application for homeless housing to indicate that they were senior. The online one has it, but not the offline. Well, someone could go in and fill out for all those addresses, not be a senior, and never get a place. Again, falling through this lack of proper paperwork. So during this meeting in January 2015, I was told I was 80 of 7,000 applicants. It has been almost 6 months since then, and 80 people have not come up. I should read this properly, sorry. Okay. The magic hat theory of access to housing placement can easily be, sorry, right from where I have it, I'm sorry. During my 2-year wait, I have seen homeless people get placement within weeks. I am privy to this information due to where I live and eat. The magic hat theory of access to housing's placement can easily be proven by looking at the monthly variance in the application dates of the homeless that have received housing. These dates could also be compared to my 2+ year wait period. I was numbered 80 of 7,000 in rent-geared income applicants. Roughly 6 months have gone since then, so that would mean less than 15 people are housed a month. With 7,000 people on the waiting list, it will take 40 years to house these people. Therefore, the application process and work done by access to housing, millions of dollars a year, is of no value to taxpayers, as a 40-year wait list is already in place. If the information I was given in regard to these numbers is wrong, then the implications are even further reaching. There is one last, more likely scenario, that the work is so errorful that they should not be tendered for further contractual hire. I find that ATH's refusal to show any interest in my situation is a flagrant act of inaccountability. They do as they please and do not suffer any consequences associated with their lack of concern for their clients. And the most important aspect of quality is say what you do and do what you say. And if anyone needs any further documentation or copies of emails I've made, I did include my email address on that.
Appreciate it. Any questions? Seeing none, I'm going to ask Councillor Green to take the chair for a moment.
I do have...
Okay, Councillor Green, go ahead.
I'm very thirsty. Was this for me?
Yeah, go ahead, Mr. Manley, please.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Okay, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Manley, I don't really have so much of a question, as it seems you've certainly laid out your case very passionately, and I just wanted to, say that I certainly feel terrible for what you're going through. Just wanted to empathize with you on that human level and say it takes a lot of courage to come here and present your case, and certainly a long challenge. And as a new councillor, something I certainly don't have the experience or knowledge to delve into, but I'm hopeful that we can have some clarity brought by staff based on this presentation to find out that if there are these errors in paperwork or these gaps in service, that we work diligently to find a way to solve that. So just know that from your presentation today, hopefully not only are you helping yourself, but you're helping people down the line as well. So
No, that's my intent. Because of where I eat and live, I'm in touch with a lot of people, and I know what's going on, and they're very thankful of me being here as well. I'm used to making a lot of money, but I've got back problems. I have been through addiction, and I do live in a house of addicts. And it's okay, I'm not going to use it again, but this is not mentally healthy for anybody, you know.
But through you, Mr. Chair, I just wanted to make that note on a very personal level that I certainly appreciate you coming here and sharing some of this stuff that I wasn't aware of, and I'm sure other members of council weren't aware of, and I'm sure staff will have some answers for, and hopefully we can find some better supports, okay? So
thank you.
Through you, Mr. Chair, just wanted to make that on the public record.
So, Councillor Green, I'll ask you to take the chair for a moment. And my commitment, Mr. Manley, to you is I will set up a meeting with appropriate staff and myself and yourself, and we will go through some of the very issues you talked about here today. And hopefully, if there's improvements that need to be made, we'll make those improvements. If there, in fact, is reasonable explanations, we'll have those explanations. But my commitment is to you is to sit down and walk through this whole thing. Okay?
Okay. Yeah, and I would be thankful to, the main thing I am looking for, of course I want a place to live, who doesn't, is to see a procedure put in place where people can understand where they stand instead of just sitting back and hoping and praying and not knowing where their file sits. That's the problem.
So as a chair and as an individual that's been an advocate for a very long time representing workers and people that can't represent themselves, I plan to sit there and do as best I can to represent the issues you've raised and ensure that you've been treated fairly. And if there are bugs in the system, so to speak, that we make the proper steps to correct those things so other people aren't impacted on a go-forward basis. So once again, thank you for coming in.
Yeah, thank you all, Your Honors. Thank you. Have a
thank
good
you.
day. Thank you.
Motion moved by Councillor Green, second by Councillor Johnson. All those in favour? Any opposed? Carried. And I did like that's a direction to staff that we can coordinate with my office to set this up with Mr. Manley. Thank you. Oh, sorry, Joanne.
Through you, Mr. Chair, at the June the 22nd committee meeting, Julian and her team are actually bringing forward a report on the access to housing wait list with some recommendations in terms of moving forward with that particular work. So there'll be some information in that report as well in terms of perhaps some issues that we're seeing and some progress that we can make.
Perfect. Councillor Green.
Mr. Chair, just maybe, while Mr. Manley settling in there, sir, I'm not sure if you caught that, but at our next meeting, they're going to be bringing back a report, maybe through you, Mr. Chair. It might be good if you're able to come back as well for that.
Thank you. So we move on to 6.3, delegation from Medora UPOL, Women's Housing and Planning Collaborative, respecting pressure of emergency shelters serving single homeless women in Hamilton. How are you today?
Mr. Chair. Good. How are you?
Good.
So on behalf of the Women's Housing Planning Collaborative, I want to say thank you to you for your ongoing commitment as a city to the crisis of women's homelessness in our community. We continue to address the crisis, and over the last investment made by the city, we were able to serve a number of women who previously we wouldn't have been able to serve, who have come to our doors. As an emergency response, Mary's Place added 10 additional beds to the shelter, and we had support from 4 violence against women shelters and transitional and second stage housing providers to help deal with this crisis. So that by the end of 2014, we've seen real success beyond just emergency shelter for women in this community. We've housed 154 women who have now accessed permanent housing and supports through the investment the city has made. By working together as agencies, we've been nimble, adaptable, and collaborative, prioritizing women's safety above all else, regardless of the limited resources we're working with. In the coming months, the women's homelessness response system will be severely diminished because of changes happening in the landscape that are facing transitional and second stage services. Of the 154 housed women, 81% of the success stories are from women who've entered and discharged from transitional housing in our community. This kind of success won't continue over the next year unless something else is done. Over the last 5 months, the future of these programs of transitional housing and second stage services has been challenged by funding cuts, and we're only starting to see the implications. Earlier this year, we heard from Phoenix Place, a second stage program with 5 units for women and children, that they were at risk of closing. Thankfully, through private donations, the program is now able to stay open. The story isn't so bright for Honoring the Circle, who will begin closing its doors in June and will displace about 15 families who are living there. There's 45 beds for women and children at Honoring the Circle, so the closure of this program is very significant for our community. And although YWCA has seen an investment in our transitional beds and programs, a reduction in funding from the city this year means we're going to be cutting services from 2 staff on duty to 1 staff on duty most hours of the day. So in response to today's recommendation from the city, we support the addition of temporary shelter beds and case management services, and we think that this is a step forward in the right direction. Many of the strides we have made in responding to the crisis have been a result of the investment in our existing assets that enabled us to help women obtain permanent housing without building more shelters or building more supports or building more capital in the city. However, new cuts in funding will now undermine this work and put us steps back in dealing with this crisis. Despite the changing landscape, our Women's Collaborative will continue to work together to strategize and serve the most vulnerable women in our community. We'll continue to work with the city. We'll continue to work with our provincial and federal funders who also come to the table to work directly with us. And we'll try to find an effective response to ending women's homelessness. In our report, written by SPRC on our behalf, in the short term, WIPIC has recommended the addition of emergency shelter beds with supports, adequate staff supports for women in shelter and transitional housing, and the maintenance of funding for transitional housing. So the staff report today supports some of these recommendations, but not all of them. To really make change in the landscape, we need the city's support of not only today's recommendations, but further investment and an increased commitment to this issue of women's homelessness in our city.
Thank you very much. It's a very important issue, and I also appreciate that sometimes we don't need to invest more capital to address the immediate need of shelters for women in the community. So there's a couple of questions. So I'm fully support what's before us here today. I'm hearing that you are as well.
Yes.
In addition to what's here, you're also requesting us to consider a larger funding envelope to create more shelter space. Is that correct?
It's not to create more shelter space, to support the existing transitional housing that's in our city right now.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned, because I just received an email this morning from the Native Urban
Native Women's Center. Sent the email to all of us, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And it's a transitional women's shelter, I understand?
It's a transitional housing program, yes.
Okay. So my question to you then is, this is one step in doing the immediate needs and providing shelter. Is it your position that we don't have enough women transitional beds funded in this community?
It's not a question of having more transitional beds, it's supporting what's already there. We think when we close the doors to Honoring the Circle, we will be in very desperate, dire circumstances. And the other piece of it is investing, and we never really fully as a city invested in the transitional housing models that we have, as well as the shelter system. So we see the movement and the support in the shelter system and increasing supports that's recommended by the city with the case management supports as a good step forward.
I appreciate that, and it was timely because I received that email this morning, so thank you.
You're welcome.
I take the chair back. Councillor Green. Councillor Perch.
Actually, my question is for staff, so I'll thank you for your presentation.
Welcome.
So I'll wait until.
Sure. So, Councillor Green, do you have a question for the presenter?
No, it's related to the presentation.
So you got a question of staff? Okay. So is there any questions for the presenter? Seeing none, could I have a motion to receive? Moved by Councillor Green, second by Councillor Aidan Johnson. All those in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you very much for being so frank and coming up here and informing us. So, Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and Councillor Green for that as well. My question through you to probably to Jillian. Jillian, this funding of transitional housing has been an issue, and my understanding is it is particularly this year. I know myself personally, I am working with Phoenix Place, and which also provides transitional housing, but also support counseling and programming to women who are in the shelter system. But my question through you, Chair, to Jillian is: has something happened to affect the funding? Because this has been, I think, particularly this year, has been a challenge. If you could just elaborate on that, please.
Chair, there has something that's happened, and that is the call for application that we did for federal homelessness funding, as well as for community homelessness prevention initiative funding. And we did that call for application at the end of last year. Things are, I would say, probably coming to a head because funding for some areas ended March 31st, 2015. So there has been a change in the direction of the federal government as far as the homelessness partnering funding goes, and that the change is to a Housing First program. And so what Housing First is that women, men, and children should be rehoused as rapidly as possible from emergency shelter into permanent housing, and then they would receive the intensive case management supports that they require. So as a result, when there was the call for applications, the women's homelessness services did do a joint application and got funding for a program called Supporting Our Sisters. And Supporting Our Sisters is an intensive case management program, Housing First program. On top of that, there were 3 other Housing First programs, another for youth, another for the Aboriginal community, and another for men. So as a result, some of the funding has shifted and changing. But the federal government was very clear that we cannot fund transitional housing with federal homelessness dollars. So the City of Hamilton does indeed fund transitional housing through the YWCA program, but not for Honoring the Circle.
All right, and thank you for that. It was the last bit of your explanation that I think is particularly important, and perhaps as a city we've not necessarily done as best a job as we could to explain that. But it was actually the criteria has changed, and that is from the federal government. So they changed the criteria on the funding that would be appropriate for more getting into permanent housing as opposed to transitional housing. And if I'm understanding you correctly through you, Chair, that is what has resulted in some of the programs coming to an end in terms of funding as of March 31st, I believe was the date that you gave. But, you know, regardless, that doesn't help the situation. We're still in need of funding transitional housing, but I think the explanation that is really key here is that the criteria for the funding has changed dramatically, and it no longer applies to transitional funding. So are we looking at, through you, Chair, possibilities of filling that stopgap? You know, are there other provincial programs or other ways that we can address that through you?
Through the chair, are you referring to the Honoring the Circle program, or in general about transitional housing?
In general, because you know I've heard myself from places that offer transitional housing that you know one of the reasons that they haven't applied for the funding is because there is no you know it's not sustainable. And so it can be canceled at any time. The criteria can change, which is exactly what happened here. I believe it's 3-year funding, the criteria changes, and then you're scrambling, trying to find a way to continue your program. So just in general, please.
Through the chair, just to clarify, Honoring the Circle did receive some Aboriginal stream homelessness partnering strategy funding, and it was a very small amount. It was $55,000 for a residential worker and then some capital costs. But it was a decision with the Aboriginal stream to invest almost all of their funding in the Aboriginal Housing First program. So I would say that there is certainly a plan that there would be a reduced dependence on transitional housing and a greater increase in people being rapidly rehoused from emergency shelter into permanent housing with the supports that they require. At this point in time, we do not have the ability to allocate any additional funding from the federal homelessness funding into transitional housing or any type of housing because that funding has been allocated now for the next 4 years. The Community Homelessness Partnering Initiative, which is the other 100% provincial funding that we would allocate, the call for applications is complete for that too. So we do not have any additional funding for that purpose at this time. The only other thing that I would recommend is advocacy to the provincial government to increase our funding for homelessness programs and potentially other programs through grants and foundations.
Thank you for that, Jillian. You know, the transitional housing programs are just so fundamentally important. I mean, all the programs are important on different levels, but for the transitional housing, for whether it's a woman or a man to come into some temporary housing, it's not just providing the room, it's the services that go with that. It's that wraparound, that helping them, you know, the nurturing, if there's mental health issues, just being able to give them time to transition. And you know, I don't know what the answer is, and I'm hearing from you that we don't necessarily have the authority even. But on the other hand, it is something that needs to be addressed. You know, I hear what you're saying about advocating to the province and to the federal government. But I would really hate to see the community let this drop, because it is just so very important. Thank you.
Councillor Green.
Thank you very much, and certainly Councillor Partridge touched on a few of the points that I wanted to raise, but I think through you, Mr. Chair, I heard that there would be systems, adequate systems in place to ensure for the rapid housing of people from, let's say, for instance, honoring the circle. How confident are we in this carryover? We've heard already from Mr. Manley some of the challenges that sometimes happen. How confident are we, Mr. Chair, to staff that that we make sure that nobody gets left behind in these gaps? To any staff that wants to.
Through the chair, we're certainly working with all the various agencies that have received funding to deliver the Housing First programs. We have a strong history of Housing First in the city with the Transitions to Homes program and the SOS, the Supporting Our Sisters program, but we're certainly going to have to monitor it very closely to ensure that it is delivering the services that we hope it will.
And I can say this, Mr. Chair, because even having privy to all the reports, especially when we get into situations, particularly around First Nations, where there's multiple levels of funding and a bunch of different envelopes, I get lost a little bit, Mr. Chair. I thought this was an organization that was well situated and doing great work. So to hear that the funding's cut there is interesting, and not knowing all the nuance of the different levels of government. Will there be supports in place for the organization to be able to navigate these different shifts in funding? Because, Mr. Chair, I can tell you that the cuts, or I should say the changing parameters that came to this strategy, we're now seeing in other budget asks in other places, and you think to the enrichment and other places where the transition may or may not be going as smoothly as planned. So something as critical as housing, Mr. Chair, I'm hopeful that we're giving full supports to organizations that may be, on the poor end of this transition. So I'm wondering what the comment is in terms of additional supports that those who may not have made the cut.
Through you, Mr. Chair, Gillian will have a comment as well, but Councillor Green, we were just being asked in terms of the province's new long-term affordable housing strategy for consulting on that piece of work. We're bringing a report forward to June the 22nd committee meeting in terms of Council's response to that request for information. One of the things that we're making clear in that report is that we don't disagree with the Housing First approach, but by singling that out, there's many other good programs in the community that are discontinued from funding, trusteeship programs, transition to home, whatever it is, that there's just simply not enough money in the system to fund what's necessary. But they certainly, through that decision, have eliminated many other very valuable programs in the community. Just to be clear, that when Gillian answered about the Aboriginal strategy, the Aboriginal community made their own decisions in terms of how the federal homelessness money was to be spent. We didn't make those decisions about honoring the circle. I think that's an important piece of information. To pass the mic over to Gillian.
Actually, that suffices. I think this is part of the challenge, just echoing Councillor Partridge. I know when we went through this the last time, we pick up the Spectator and we see, the city of Hamilton's cutting funding to six different agencies. And I think the story that's not being told, and I think where a lot of the advocacy gets lost in terms of different levels of government, it's appropriate my councillor colleague Marula is here as I speak to this, because it really does get lost when we have downloading or we have these shifts that really are the responsibility of the province. I think we need to get way out in front of it, Mr. Chair, and as a community really highlight where and who is getting hurt most by these policy decisions, so that the residents here don't think that it's a decision here at council or here through our staff that are causing the hardships of the residents here in Hamilton. So I certainly appreciate the clarity on that. It's important for the viewers to know. It's important for the public to know that a lot of these decisions are out of our hands, and when it comes to this table, it's really just a matter of us managing what's already been decided. So thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Councillor DeVille.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and through you to Gillian. Gillian, thank you very much for the phone call we had prior to this meeting on the honoring the circle. But I reading this report, I guess it's important that the viewers know if this agency, this organization closes in the middle of June, and if there's 15 families, what are they to do? I mean, are we creating, when I look at this report, they could be filled by this temporary shelters, and you're only getting 10 for now. It wouldn't be enough.
The Chair, I just want to assure Council that the agencies who work with women in our community are working very hard to ensure that it's now 14 women and that they are going to find housing. In a conversation that I just had with Catherine Kalinowski, who is the director of Good Shepherd and also the head of the Women's Homelessness Planning Collaborative, tomorrow all the various agencies who work with homeless women in our community, as well as Honoring the Circle, are getting together to case conference to go through each of the individuals, and they are going to ensure that each of them are going to have housing by the time that Honoring the Circle closes. So that's just a good example of how the agencies in Hamilton do work together well to ensure that the women in Hamilton are cared for as best as possible. And also, the women would not be returning to shelter. So Honoring the Circle is a transitional housing program. So generally, and this is only generally, women go to transitional housing after they've been in emergency shelter. And so I don't think that there are any plans, even though I might be wrong, that they would be returning to emergency shelter. The plan is that they would go into second stage housing or permanent housing with the supports that they require.
Okay, so thanks, Julian. So way I take in that, there is an idea, hoping that the plan works, that the organizations all are working together, and decisions will have to be made, I guess, before middle of June. That was the deadline I heard. But if it does fail, what happens? I mean, what can we do? We put them back into emergency shelters, or?
As Joanne just said to me, we can't let it fail. Okay. Certainly the emergency shelters are the backup if all else fails, but that certainly isn't the intention at this point in time.
Okay, and then the other important question, Julian, is because Honoring the Circle, they have that kind of transitional housing has very many support programs that helps these individuals cope with some of the tragedies they've been facing. Will those support programs still be there for them?
Through the chair, yes, the support programs will still be there with the Homeward Bound, which is the Aboriginal Housing First program, as well as the Supporting Our Sisters, the SOS program. Both those programs work with women and children to assist them in finding permanent housing and providing them with the supports that they require to stay housed.
Okay, and my last question is, Honoring the Circle, when you're calling for the applications from November and that, they could also apply into that program?
Through the chair, are you referring to the call for applications that
Yes.
we had last year? Honoring the Circle did not apply for funding.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Councillor Partridge to take the chair for a moment.
Yep, go ahead, please.
I certainly support the report here before us. It's pretty clear that there's a need. You're locking in five permanent, or I guess expanding 5 beds permanently at Mary's Place, and then there'll be a tender that goes out for additional beds that's being recommended, and has been clear through the presentation earlier that I think we have another one coming, that there's a need. I think the interesting piece and more concerning piece, not more concerning, because certainly you need the shelters to deal with the emergency situations of people that have no place to go. I guess the concern I have, though, when we talk about the circle the transitional pieces. I'm not clear on the need for transitional beds was pretty clear in the last 10, 15 years. That's why we established, and there was funding established for the transitional piece to provide the services, get them ready, and then ship them into permanent housing. That was identified as a housing strategy, years past. Is that strategy, as a result of the funding commitment shifting?
Jillian, I think reiterate the answer for the federal government funding and the criteria change.
Through the chair, there certainly the federal government through the homelessness partnering strategy, as well as the provincial government, has certainly shown support for the Housing First model, which is rapid rehousing from emergency shelter into permanent housing without the transitional housing as that second step in there. But certainly what we've heard from the agencies that serve women, that there is a place, especially for women in transitional housing. Single women and women with children seem to appreciate that opportunity to go into transitional housing first and then from there into permanent housing. So I would say that certainly our funders have great support for Housing First, and that's why, in part, why we're going there, but also the research as far as homelessness has certainly proven that the Housing First model does indeed work.
Councillor?
Okay, so can you help remind me for the purpose of context, I guess, going back when there wasn't transitional housing funded, and there was an argument for creating funding for transitional housing, was it not a Housing First strategy then?
Joanne, please.
Mr. Chair, in the past, we did fund some transitional housing for women. It was called Somerville House, and it was through the Good Shepherd Centre. We actually were caught in a provincial audit in terms of we were using our per diem funding for emergency shelters to fund the transitional housing, and we were told that we could not do that. That was for per diems and emergency shelters, so we had to end the funding for Somerville House. That was a very difficult case for us and for the community because the province said no, the money is not for, is for per diems. So we had to end that funding. With the current funding that we get from the federal government, no, we cannot fund transitional housing. With the money that we get from the province, our CHIPI money, yes, the priority is Housing First, but we have a little bit more discretion with that. But when we did our call for proposals, out of there came some of the funding that we do provide for the Y and for the SOS is what our contribution is towards transitional housing. The rest of it went into a variety of other programs, mainly with the intent, the priority of Housing First. Okay,
so I appreciate that. I think Councillor Green made the point. So philosophically, it doesn't appear that the provincial and federal government has as much appreciation for the transitional housing model, or have shifted that priority to the Housing First model. And before they allowed the funding for those transitional housing. So I'm not sure what shifted from a policy perspective. And then again, I think the next question is, what is the city's position in regards to prioritizing transitional housing? Does it still have a place in the current continuum? And if it does, then I guess the next question, what are we doing to talk to the federal and provincial partners that their approach is short-sighted?
Jillian, please.
Through the chair, the City of Hamilton does support transitional housing, and that we are funding transitional housing for women, and also we support that concept for youth as well in some of our funding. We have certainly been clear with the federal government that we did see a place for transitional housing in the funding, but it was their decision not to fund transitional housing.
I appreciate it. The last question is, if in fact this could be the difference of what's it called, the Healing Circle? Honoring the Circle, thank you. If this could jeopardize the organization itself and the great work they've done for a number of years, do we have a strategy to sit down with that organization to ensure that they continue being a player in this community and providing services? Do we have a strategy?
Jillian, please.
We don't have a strategy at this point in time, but they are part of the Women's Homelessness Planning Collaborative. And so we're certainly working closely with the Women's Homelessness Planning Collaborative around planning for homelessness services for women. So they'll be a part of that discussion.
Great. And there's some great representations on that collaborative. So thank you for that. Those are my questions. I'll take the chair back.
I have no further speakers, so back to you.
Thank you. So we do have, we have received, those are just questions to staff. We move to the next delegation. And I had Deidre. I don't see Deidre. Oh, Deidre is here. Sorry. Come on up, Deidre and Sarah.
First, I want to apologize for my outburst there, Councillor Whitehead and Chair of this committee, about the SPCA earlier when you were introducing us, just because I was very excited. You know, I often get introduced as Jody Pike from the SPCA, and last week Kat came to the SPRC, and we had to house the cat. So now I feel like we have fulfilled a mandate of both the SPRC and the SPCA. So I was quite excited when I thought you were maybe introducing me like that.
Thank you for that clarification.
That is not the important issue that I'm here to talk about today. Housing cats is one thing, but housing women is another. And I'm the facilitator for the Women's Housing Planning Collaborative. For the next 4 years through the Homelessness Partnering Strategy. That's a commitment that the SPRC has, and my colleague Sarah Mayo and I will be providing support to this very important planning table in Hamilton. And so you're having some very important conversation here about transitional housing and housing first and rapid housing and all things that we've been taking a look at as a systems planning table since October, when the city asked us to be leaders in a conversation. And so I want to acknowledge the people. You can see the representation on the slide, but in fact we have today Laura Workman, the Associate Executive Director from Honoring the Circle, is here, who could be available to answer any questions you might have. We also have Christine Viljazou from Good Shepherd, the Director of Women's Services there. And of course, you've heard from Medora already today, and Val Sadler is here from Mission Services, and other supportive members from the various agencies. So we are here to support the recommendations that have gone forward in this staff report that you're going to receive today. How could we not? Because many of them came from the report that SPRC helped to pull together with the voices of the women on that collaborative. And so we're very much in agreement with that. But again, since that report came out, which it's in your package, of course, it's the last bit in your package. The news of the beds closing at Honoring the Circle has become evident and has created more of a crisis situation. And so we want to just be sure that you're aware of these issues, and it certainly sounds like you're considering them. So our report asked for we were asked, what's the best solution? If these 10 emergency beds, these temporary beds are going to close, what's the solution? And I want to also out myself as a neighbor to Mary's Place. It was in the paper today. And to say that, what an amazing asset Good Shepherd Women's Services is in our community, for the women, for the neighborhood. And but they also knew that those 10 beds were creating quite pressure on the system. And so we certainly think 5 beds is manageable there and support that recommendation. And so the recommendations are there in your agenda that you can take a look at, but we have some great data that supports that. The recommendations Sarah Mayo is going to show you in a second about the turnaways. The last time that WIPIC was here presenting to you, we talked about 300 turnaways in a month, and now it's gone up to 500 turnaways. So there's something else that's really creating a lot of pressure on the system. Recommendations around transitional housing, as Councillor Partridge mentioned, are also in the WIPIC report. It's one of the key things to stay committed to supporting transitional housing, but also to find new supports for that. And clearly, it's become evident that that's important. So really, I just want you to have a better understanding of how we've come to some of our conclusions. So I'm going to turn it over to Sarah, and I can be available for questions, but she knows more than me.
So quickly, this explains in large part why we're having a crisis in women's emergency shelters in Hamilton, the exponential increase in rents. This was presented to Council by staff last month. And also staff spoke to Council about landlords being much more reticent, not willing to help out women in emergency situations, not willing to participate in housing allowances and subsidy programs. And as we also heard, there's long waiting lists, even when things go well with the administration of the access to housing wait list. The average wait time is actually about a year for people in emergency situations, including homeless people or people experiencing homelessness or fleeing violence. In our report, we looked at data. We spoke to all the women's shelters looking at data for December 2014. And Mary's Place alone turned away an average of 4.2 women every night in December 2014. And that stayed consistent since then. I just spoke to them today, and it's pretty much the same in April. In December 2014, on average, each individual woman went and asked for shelter 2.8 times at Mary's Place, who was turned away in December. And these are unique women. So we speak about turnaways in the hundreds when but because women are asking multiple times, we also try to track how many individual women are we talking about. And so in December 2014, there were 46 individual women at Mary's Place. The highest was at Inasmuch House in Mission Services, where there were 64 individual women who were turned away in December 2014. So we know there's at least 64 women, and it could be higher because we could be adding them up. They may not be going to all those different places and asking for shelter. So it could be 151. It could even be higher because some of the shelters don't track at the individual level because of privacy reasons. They don't want to ask women's name if they don't have a place for them to stay. And we spoke to women who were staying at the shelters and asking them, what was it like to be refused shelter? And women felt disheartened and inclined to give up. Another respondent elaborated, it's important to make sure that women can take the first step of getting into shelter and have a second step of housing after a shelter stay. Otherwise, you begin to give up. She went on to explain that she had seen many women turn to dangerous situations of sex work and or drug use in order to numb the feelings of rejection from shelter. So our report lists some recommendations. The short-term recommendations have been discussed, and some are in the report today. Medium-term recommendations from WIPIC include development and testing of a centralized bed use allocation system, the expansion of withdrawal support services, that's also in the recommendations from today in terms of asking the LHINs for funding for that, provide interim housing options with supports, and longer-term options, develop affordable housing stock that meets the unique needs of women, reorganize Hamilton's domiciliary hostels system to provide better supportive housing options for women, and develop robust community and peer-to-peer supports. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sarah. Have any questions of the presenter? Seeing none, I'm going to ask Councillor Green to take the... Go ahead, Councillor Green.
Maybe I should just move to receive or wait for you because it is actually through to staff but related to the presentation again. So my apologies, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, actually, all I was going to do is thank Social Planning Research Council for doing all the great work they do in our community. You are one of the strongest backbones on social causes, and we need to recognize all the hard and good efforts you've made on behalf of many of those that need you. So I just wanted to thank you for the presentation here today. So I will take the chair back, and a new motion to receive, moved by Councillor Green, second by Councillor Aidan Johnson. All those in favour? The opposed? Carried. Councillor Green, question of staff.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. It was brought up the rising costs of rent. You know, we're having lots of conversations, Mr. Chair, around gentrification and what that looks like. One of my concerns, one of my very serious concerns, is I've had an increase in people searching for homes. They're being displaced right now with 60 days notice, using this eminent domain clause where people are, real estate people are coming in, so-called investors, I say so-called, very sarcastically, that are displacing people under the guise of eminent domain, more so just to say that they're doing major renovations and then raise the price up. Mr. Chair, we have no way of knowing what happens after these folks are evicted. We have no way of tracking who these so-called investors are. And I know we had a conversation earlier, or at least in the past term, Mr. Chair, around licensing. But certainly at this point in time, I have a very serious consideration for, at the very least, a registration, Mr. Chair. So I'm wondering, through you, if there would be a possibility, whether through a direction or a motion, to look at the feasibility of a landlord registration, Mr. Chair, because I'm seeing this gentrification happen in Ward 3 faster than anybody can keep control of. And quite frankly, I really challenge the legitimacy of all these so-called eminent domains on the triplexes and duplexes. So it's a very serious problem, one that we don't have an answer for and has a lot of complexity, but it doesn't mean that we shy away from it, Mr. Chair. So I'm wondering when at the appropriate time I can move a motion to begin to look at the feasibility for a landlord registration.
Thank you. Any comments from staff?
Through the chair, Planning and Economic Development is looking into that possibility, and I know that I've had several conversations with them, so we are looking at doing a joint report on that topic.
So Mr. Chair, as much as I love planning and ECDEV, this is very much a community emergency services issue, I believe, and I will consider this a notice of motion as I get some things fleshed out. There's something that I know we have to look at with planning, Section 19 and what that looks like, and so I will consider this a notice of motion for something coming down the line.
I appreciate it, and for clarification, there is a rental committee. Right, I believe it's called. Is that what rental licensing committee?
Through the chair, there is a property standards committee. Would that be what you're referring to?
No. There's a committee with landlords and councillors looking at the whole issue of substandard rental units in our community. It emanated from the discussion on licensing rental units. So there is a committee struck, and I've got to think that this would fall under that purview as well, because they're going to be looking at the whole array of legislative and regulatory tools they might utilize on a go-forward basis. So it's certainly timing to open that discussion and turn up the heat.
So then, Mr. Chair, through you to the clerks, maybe I'll be asking that we convene that subcommittee. I know you're on it, I'm on it, as well as some residents who have been selected through the selection process. But I just wanted to make note the slide that was raised, Mr. Chair, the high costs. There's this, this condoization of apartments, which is eroding affordable housing, and there's this idea of eminent domain, which, quite frankly, after people are displaced, I don't think there's I don't think that there's an intention for people, once you're kicked out, to revisit, find out, did the family really move in, and if they did, what does that mean? So that is one crack in our system that I would certainly like to fill, and I appreciate you referring it to the Rental Licensing Committee, of which we're both on, and I look forward to having that conversation there. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Aidan Johnson.
Thanks very much, and I'd like to echo the thanks to Deirdre and Sarah for the outstanding presentation and rich information we received today. I don't want to get the conversation too off track, but I'd like to thank Councillor Green for bringing up what I think is a very vital policy move that we need to be pursuing in the city. Something that's sort of unique about the rental housing portfolio is that it involves both low-income families as well as at-risk students in the McMaster and Mohawk communities. I believe it's myself, Councillor Whitehead, and Councillor Green who are the council reps on the Rental Housing Committee. And the reason I think that's a good thing is that it represents a possibility of the very at-risk, low-income families and communities in Ward 3 having conversation and joining forces with the Mohawk neighbours and the McMaster neighbours, and hopefully with the student communities, to create policies that work for everybody. So I think it's that kind of multi-community conversation that represents probably our best hope for making some good progress on this. So many thanks to Councillor Green. I'm looking forward to moving forward with that. Cheers.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Councillor Green to take the chair for a moment. There was, in part of the presentation, a number of recommendations from the Social Planning Research Council that aren't reflected in this report. Can I just ask, what is the status of those recommendations? Have we taken positions? Are we still pondering those recommendations?
Through the chair, we are going to be pondering those recommendations and working with the Women's Homelessness Planning Collaborative as far as the feasibility and implementation of them. And we are going to be bringing a report forward to Council in September 2016, not only on those recommendations, but on the status of the emergency shelter system, given the additional beds and mobile case management.
I just want to make sure that the recommendations are not caught in this report are still part of the overall dialogue and discussion. So those are my questions. I'll take the chair back. Councillor Partridge.
Yes, yes, thank you. And just to follow up on that report, did you say is coming in September 2016?
That is correct.
Okay.
September 2016.
Okay. So just so that we don't lose the recommendations that were made in that social planning and research document, I'm wondering if that could be an appendix to that report, just so that we've got it there for context.
Through the chair, we can certainly do that.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Councillor Green.
Forgive me, Mr. Chair. I'm just curious, why a year and a half for the report?
Through the chair, we were thinking in terms of a year and a half because we're doing the call for applications. So we won't actually be adding 15 additional beds to the emergency shelter system until probably December. And so we figure we would have that period of time, almost a year, to assess the impact of having the additional beds in the system as well as the additional case management. And that would also give us a good opportunity to really work on the recommendations so that we can have a good report going forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That makes pretty good sense to me.
Thank you. So at this point, lots of good discussion. We do have the regional report, which we sort of deviated from, and that is the that was delegations. Sorry, we're not at 8.1 yet. Thank you. Actually, we are now at presentation 7.1, and Councillor Merulla has arrived just in time. I call Project Manager McQuestion Urban Farm, respecting McQuestion Urban Farm Design and Construction. Actually, could I, before you come up, just for a matter of routine, we had a lot of discussion. We have the delegations here. Can we just sort of move up 8.1 and deal with that so we can have the individuals here to hear any discussion if there's any. So hold on, don't go away for the question, but I'm going to look at my colleagues to see. I did a motion to move 8.1 up. Moved by Councillor Merulla, second by Councillor Green. All those in favour? Any opposed? Carried. 8.1. Is there any discussions on the report? Item 8.1, pressure and emergency shelter serving single women's homeless women. Moved by Councillor Merulla, second by Councillor Deval. All those in favour? Any opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Now, thank you. It's fully endorsed. Now we move to the McQuestion. Urban Farm, respecting Urban Farm Design and Construction in Ward 4. I believe it's Mr. Adam Watson. And I'm going to ask Councillor Green. Can I get you to take the chair momentarily?
Mr. Watson? You might want to just, okay.
Yes.
I know it's a little bit of a stretch. It's not a very well-placed microphone.
All right. Great. Can you hear me? Oh, great. Thank you. All right. Good afternoon, Chair and members of the Emergency and Community Services Committee. I'm Adam Watson, Project Manager with the McQuestion Urban Farm Project with the Neighbourhood Action Strategy. And with me today is Pat Reed, resident of McQuestion. well-known and a member of the McWeston Community Planning Team, as well as the McWeston Urban Farm Subcommittee. So we'll be presenting the design of the farm proposed today, and look forward to any conversation we have. Pat, go ahead.
Thank you. Welcome, everybody. First of all, if you're not aware of where McWeston is, McWeston neighborhood is in the east end of Hamilton in Sam Morales ward. The southern boundary is Queenston Road, the west boundary is Parkdale, the east boundary is the Red Hill Valley, and the north is the railway tracks north of Barton. So that's our neighborhood. And interesting, in our neighborhood, we have a great deal of difficulty for access to fresh food. The closest store is approximately 2 kilometers from anyone. We also have a problem of people not having access to vehicles or have mobility issues as well. Many of our residents live on Ontario Works or Ontario Disability with a large number of single parents. And as you can imagine, a single parent takes their children to get groceries out by bus, and to come home, they have to take a taxi. So this becomes an added cost to the groceries that they get. Interesting, in our neighborhood, as you can see the banner over here, up top there's a 7-Eleven. It is the most profitable 7-Eleven in Hamilton. That is because there's no access to other food. The Urban Farm Project is a dream of the McWeston residents, and it's utilizing 3 acres of land that has been lying dormant for 60 years. The neighborhood would like to increase food security, provide food education and skill building, as well as job skills, training, and options for social enterprise. The McWeston Neighborhood Action Plan, which was approved by Council in 2012, and the development of the urban farm is one of the key actions in this plan. Goal C is to enhance the community health and well-being, and part of that, Objective 1, is to ensure food security for the neighborhood. Other 2 goals that it does achieve is strengthening economic development and investments. And the goal D is to strengthen neighborhood pride and promote neighborhood beautification. Adam?
Thank you, Pat. Pictured here is the proposed urban farm site, outlined in yellow. It's Melvin Avenue and Woodward Avenue are to the north, Hillcrest Park and the Red Hill Valley are to the east, and St. Helens Centre and Oriole Crescent are to the west. After the Neighbourhood Action Plan was approved, staff began working with the planning team to develop a plan for the creation of the urban farm. The McWeston Urban Farm Committee was formed and has been meeting regularly for the past 2 years to develop the neighbourhood's vision for the farm. Committee members include neighbourhood residents, service providers, the community developer, and city staff from community services, public health, and public works. One of the major products of what we've produced from that was the banner here, done through a facilitated workshop, which outlined all of the neighbourhood residents' visions for what they would like to see included in the urban farm. An urban agriculture review was also completed by researchers at the University of Toronto to determine opportunities and barriers in place for urban agriculture in Hamilton. Planning restrictions were identified, and staff have made the necessary amendments to the official plan, which were approved by Council in fall of 2014 to allow for urban agriculture to take place in the city. A Phase 1 and Phase 2 environmental site assessment was completed for the site throughout 2014 to determine the presence of any soil contamination. Fortunately, the soil sampling results came back clean, with only a couple of small areas of concern that we've been able to mitigate through the design process. The first stage of farm development was the partnership with the Hamilton Victory Gardens in 2014. The northern section of the farm site was licensed to Hamilton Victory Gardens with the goal of starting to produce fresh food for the neighbourhood and to start resident activity on the site. There are now over 140 raised beds on the site producing food for the neighbourhood and local food banks, as well as community garden beds to give residents a place to grow their own food. In the fall of 2014, the Neighbourhoods Office brought forward a temporary project manager to take the initial groundwork that we've completed and move forward with the McQuestion Farm Committee on the design and construction of the urban farm. A stakeholder committee was formed in February 2015 to work with a design consultant to take the neighbourhood vision for the farm, as illustrated in the banner, as well as take the site topography and the soil assessment results and complete a full conceptual design of the urban farm, which we are excited to present to you today. Bean & Stock Design and Consulting was selected as the designer due to their extensive experience in working closely with residents and community-based organizations to design functional, innovative, and beautiful green spaces. Here is an aerial view of the farm site displaying the full community vision for the McQuestion Urban Farm. In the northern section, which is on the left, up at Melvin, the raised beds are already constructed by Hamilton Victory Gardens. South of this is where we intend to move forward with the proposed construction activities. First, we propose to grade the site and create the farm fields in the middle and southern portions of the site. Configure the site drainage and install the required pathways and surfacing. Trees will be planted for shade and windbreak to make the space enjoyable for visitors, and fruit trees will be planted throughout the site, particularly in the middle section. Perennial plants and shrubs will be planted mostly along the eastern edge of the site to provide pollinator habitat, as well as food and medicinal plants, and also to provide some visual separation from the adjacent neighbours. This corridor of planting we are proposing as a native plant walk, which will showcase many of the food and medicinal plants traditionally used by the Aboriginal people who lived around the Red Hill Valley. And it will link in well with the extensive ecological restoration work that was done as part of the Red Hill Valley Parkway. Entrance features at the main pedestrian accesses to the site are also planned. Wherever possible, we are planning to incorporate a community build process into these construction activities, where residents are involved hands-on with the construction. This is done to build community ownership of the farm and to offer education and job skills development to neighbourhood residents. So moving into some of the specific design features, as the urban farm will serve as a place to host food education workshops and school group tours from across the city, an accessible community gathering space and outdoor amphitheatre with a covered area is planned for the middle of the site. This middle area of the site is highly trafficked with students and community residents, so we would like to keep that open and accessible. Just south of the raised beds is the low point of the site, which results in an area of flooding and standing water for a significant period of the year. As the site doesn't currently have a connection to the municipal water supply, we will propose to turn this liability into a resource and construct a pond that collects rainwater and feeds the irrigation system. The irrigation system will be powered by a small wind turbine and will eliminate a significant annual operating cost for the farm, while demonstrating an innovative environmental solution to visitors at the site. At the south end of the site, we propose to construct a service vehicle access and a secure storage area for farm equipment and tools. We are very thankful to our partners at City Housing Hamilton for allowing us to utilize their existing driveway and maintenance building at Oriole Crescent to achieve some significant cost savings. At the south end of the site is where we propose to construct a covered area with shade sails and picnic tables to install the wind turbine to power the irrigation system. In order to complete the construction works described, staff is requesting permission to undertake a competitive procurement process at an estimated cost of $350,000 to be funded from the Neighbourhood Action Strategy. This area, as you can see, also includes different features such as an enclosed food preparation area, a teaching greenhouse, and a larger production greenhouse. These are not planned to be funded through the Neighbourhoods Office, and they are not required in order for us to begin farm operations in the spring. All of these amenities will allow for the farm to increase the amount of food produced on the site and provide more options for food education, job skills training, and social enterprise at the urban farm. We are actively pursuing sponsorships, donations, and grants to fund these amenities, and we have an interest from some significant donors, which we plan to report back on as part of the farm's operating and business plan later in 2015. This project has already been successful in securing grants and donations of over $70,000 which has allowed us to hire a community animator for a year to promote community engagement at the site and coordinate activities at the Victory Gardens. We've also done a gardening camp for 120 neighborhood children this summer. So thank you very much. We will be showing a quick video of the animation of the farm design, and Pat will have a few closing remarks.
The McQuestion Urban Farm will serve as a pilot project for urban agriculture in Hamilton and serve as a model for other food projects in other neighborhoods. The McQuestion Urban Farm will be big enough to offer fresh produce and help build food skills to residents of other neighborhoods. We're hoping that the other neighborhood action strategies will become participatory in this process. We have communicated with them as well. And it will offer educational opportunities to residents and school groups from across the city. The farm, in combination with the planned recreation trail next to the site, will make McQuestion a destination for people from across the city and improve the health of our residents. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent presentation to both Pat and Adam. Fantastic. We have the ward councillor, Councillor Sam Marula, first up.
Let me just start off, Mr. Chairman, by thanking both Adam and Pat for the presentation. I really don't have any questions. I do want to speak about the item itself, so I'll move that we receive the presentation if there aren't any other questions from other members.
We do have Councillor Partridge who may have some...
Fair enough. So I'll move it accordingly, seconded by Councillor Partridge, and then she...
Councillor Partridge, did you have any questions for the presentation, or would you like to receive it and then speak to it?
Well, no, as seconder to the motion, I would like to speak to it, though.
Okay.
Okay. I just want to say thank you so much. Being the ward councillor for Ward 15 in Flamborough, of which 70% is rural and farm country, and growing up in farm country myself, I love that component of having the children's participation as part of that. And as you know, I think a lot of people probably recognize that there are a number of farms out in Flamborough that have children from the city come out and do tours of the farms. And, I just, having grown up that way, I can't imagine anyone not ever being to a farm and not knowing where eggs come from and, where the farm animals and the crops and everything else that happens on it. But I particularly like, through you, Chair, I particularly like the addition of the windmill that is going to be there, and I'm just wondering, can you just expand a little bit on the irrigation system and how that will work? I'm assuming there's going to be a pond, a natural pond.
Mm-hmm. Yes, through the chair. So this slide here, maybe I'll quickly go to it. This here is the low point on the site, which already floods for probably a good 3 or 4 months of the year. We call it Lake McQuestion. Because there's already standing water there and most of the site has a clay base underneath it, quite a thick one, we propose to excavate this out and flow all the water onto that lands on the site, the incident rainfall, down into this pond structure here. So it will be an enclosed pond space which will have a connection to a pumping system which would be powered by the windmill.
All right, thank you very much for that. Anyone who has, worked on a farm or who has a farm will tell you that you always irrigate your crops by the natural rain and the water through a pond or some sort of an irrigation system that is not connected to your well. And in this case, we would not want city water to be watering our crops with the additional, chemicals, and that's just not what farming is about. So even on real farms, and this is an urban farm, which I'm a huge supporter of urban farms, and I just congratulate you so much for doing this. We need to do this in other areas of the city, particularly down by the waterfront in the East End. I just think it's right down there to do this kind of thing. So thank you very much, and I'm very honored to second it.
My apologies, Councillor Marula, for inversing the order. Feel free to speak on the motion if you'd like, or would you like to?
I've just received it, so perhaps you can have their seat now.
Yes, okay. We have a motion to receive the presentation. All those in favor? Carried.
And now on the...
And thank you both, Adam and Pat, for your wonderful presentation and all the wonderful work that you've done leading up to today. And on the item, we have Councillor Marula.
Yes, thanks, Mr. Chairman. And again, I want to thank Adam and Pat and the neighborhood, and the McQuestion neighborhood for their involvement, and Suzanne Brown and her staff in really executing what I think is a plan that's not only entrepreneurial in its foundation, but also it's a social enterprise. And you look at all of the various aspects of what's before us, and it really is, what's old is new again in many ways. And I know I say this quite often. It's quite remarkable how eating local, which years ago when my parents as immigrants came over, everyone had a garden, and everyone recycled and everyone reused, and everyone basically lived in the manner conducive to being very social conscious, but also very environmentally conscious and conscious. And looking at all of the successes today, and looking at what's new, which was old, it's quite remarkable how now the hipsters have taken ownership of something that is really archaic in many ways. So, but I'm glad that we are moving in this direction because it is sustainable, and the way with urban sprawl and other aspects of lack of intensification, we were headed towards an unsustainable type of scenario. And you look at this project, you look at the sweat equity component, you look at the fact that St. Helens Community Center, and I have to give congratulations to the Catholic School Board, who rather than closing and selling school to the same taxpayers that already paid for that school, they've actually made it into a very active community hub that is very tangible in all of the services they provide. So to them, I say congratulations and thank you. I also must thank Pat Reed as one of the presenters here today, with her passion in that community and ensuring that that St. Helens and all of the aspects of St. Helens is active and very robust for the community. McQuestion is a neighborhood that has come a long way. I know that Pat, who also sits on our housing, Hamilton Housing Committee or Board, also recognizes that we've come a long way in the sense that we've diversified the tenants at the Oriole Crescent, and we went from everyone basically being low income, where we in essence ghettoized an area, to it being mixed income now. And as a direct result, we've seen some very tangible outcomes come from that. In that, we've seen people actually coming in and actually purchasing homes. We've seen a renaissance in that particular area with the redevelopment of Lowe's. And although redevelopment of Lowe's, we've had the bike trail, the pedestrian bridge, which is not too far from there, a new elementary school. So we have property values increasing by 300-400%. Things are going well. But in all of that, we still have a segment of the population that truly are in need. And this particular project, in essence, provides an opportunity to not only allow those that are in need to access what was, I guess, perceived as a vegetable and fruit desert, but also have them involved through sweat equity and empowerment in the process to ensure that it's not really a hand out, but a hand up. And I think that's where the distinction is when it comes to these types of projects. And I have to applaud also the neighboring community, particularly those that are volunteering, and also those that are participating in the actual activities there. So lastly, all I basically say is that when you're looking at some sort of project, this is a model that's, as I mentioned, a social enterprise with an entrepreneurial flair that is really a model that all other neighborhoods in this community should be aspiring to see come to fruition. And I proudly move it and passionately move it, seconded by Councillor Partridge. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Green.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And I think, Mr. Chair, what's most interesting about this for me personally is that in 2010, I actually had the privilege of doing a walk through McQuestion with the Hamilton Community Foundation as a board member. And I think at that time it might have been David Derbyshire doing the tour. And what strikes me, I think, most is that walking through that, it was certainly a humble garden. at that time, and I can even in fact remember back to 2006 when they did the Extreme Park makeover. So watching this community kind of emerge, and then of course here at council seeing this strategy come to its completion, or at least the beginning of its completion, for me is really special because I think it speaks to the work of the neighborhood action strategies. I would guess this is probably the biggest, the largest infrastructure project that has been really designed and led and supported by the residents, which I think is not just a testament to Ward 4 and the leadership that's there, but really what is, they're showing the rest of the city, Mr. Chair, and all the other hubs, what is possible if you think big. Because this is a community, a neighborhood transformation in the taking. We're seeing it now, and I can only imagine in a year or two when it's complete and we're all getting strawberries from the farmer's field there. Councilor Marula, is that a condition on the, that we'll look back at today and think about, you know, a humble garden, Mr. Chair, that turned into an action strategy that became a neighborhood shared vision, now truly supported by the city. And it is, and I do say that because, you know, it's one thing to have the action strategies out there, but if we're not funding them, if we're not empowering people to make these kind of huge transformations in their community, it's really just, it's all policy. So I am so excited to see this over the last, well, since 2010, over the last 5 years. And it's a testament to Paul Johnson, to you, Suzanne, and to your entire staff, Adam, and all the residents that are there. I'm looking forward to joining you on the celebratory opening harvest. I'll bring my galoshes and maybe do some work myself. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Green. I'll ask Councillor Green to take the chair. At agenda review, had to get clarification. I thought it was happening in, although it said Ward 4, I thought they had the name mixed up because there's McQuestion Park in Ward 7. So after that clarification, it made a whole heck of a lot of sense in regards to the proposal here before us. The other thing is, I know that there was a pretty significant gardens at Highland Baptist Church, Victory Gardens, with Mr. Dave Wilcox, produced I don't know how many pounds of food. So I would hope that as we go down this great, exciting initiative, that we got Rollston that's on our radar in regards to neighborhood development, and I understand the nature and the demographics of Rollston. I can't wait to see something like this happen there as well. So well done, Councillor Marula, well done staff, and well done neighborhood for this initiative. I'll take the chair back.
You can't have it. No, I'm kidding.
So it's been duly moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Carried.
Any opposed? Carried. So we're now at 8.2. Is there any questions and discussions with respect to the item 8.2, purchase of new stretchers and loading systems? Councillor Jackson.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'm supportive of this, but I just got 3 quick questions through you to Chief Sanderson. Chief, during the 2015 budget, both capital and operating, I think I was one of the ones just consistently asking, look, you know, is this your ask for this year? Is the extra ambulances, the extra impact on the operating? And so I just don't remember the need for the new stretchers. Unless my memory failed me, I don't recall need for new stretchers coming out. Mr. Chairman, through you to the Chief, possibly for a comment, please.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we did not go over the new stretchers last year during the council budget presentation times. We were in the process of doing an evaluation with staff with respect to the stretchers, and our focus had been based upon ensuring that we could do this within a cost recovery basis in terms of the capital cost. So it was not considered at the 2015 capital process time. We did not review it at that time. It was based upon staff evaluation. The actual review by staff ended in December. We finished our review of it at that point in time, and we created the report following that.
Okay, thanks, Chief, for that explanation. Sole sourcing it to a Striker Power or with Roland Emergency, can you just explain, are they the only game in town, Mr. Chairman? Through you to Chief.
Through you, Mr. Chair. The Stryker stretchers are marketed in Ontario through a single vendor. He has the entire market in Ontario. The only options for purchasing that particular device is through Stryker directly or through their vendor in Ontario, which is Roland Products. The actual price from them is exactly the same, and the installation will be being done by Roland as a marketed, as a capable distributor and installer in Ontario.
My only concern, Chief, with the sole source and something like this, and I raise it with when we buy new buses and things like that, I just want to make sure we're not held hostage at the time that these stretchers, if approved today, after what, it's a 6 to 8 year life expectancy, if I read the information report correctly. I just want to make sure we're not held hostage, which could potentially cost taxpayers more money if there's only one supplier out there and we're beholden to them. Mr. Chairman, through you to the Chief.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I share that same concern. When we end up looking at devices as we move forward, we have to look at it and make sure that we have the best competitive price that we can. I can tell you that when we looked out of province in terms of the actual power load aspect of the device, the Stryker power load that goes into the vehicle, we actually contacted our vendor of record, Demers, which is based out of Montreal, Quebec, to look at their product, and they could actually introduce it and put it into our vehicle. The price was significantly higher coming from them. So we do share that concern. We will be looking at that on an ongoing basis. But it is, I think, in the best interest to have consistency and stability in the platform.
Thanks for taking that under advisement, Chief, and acknowledging mutual concern there. And lastly, the C part. Now, I guess I've been around a few years to see where this payback type thing, and with best of intentions, and I've been around long enough to see where after a few years that particular department heads come back to council and gone, you know what, we were hoping to have this paid back, but the savings didn't quite result, Mr. Chairman, the way we were hoping they would, and council usually, and I've been part of that, ends up saying, well, good experiment. I'm sorry that, well, we didn't get the savings we were hoping for, and that may be a lesson learned type of thing. So, Chief, are you going to keep a close eye on this, Mr. Chairman, through the Chief, please?
Through you, Mr. Chair, not only am I going to be keeping a close eye on that, I know that the general manager and the finance folks will be keeping a very close eye on it. We've gone over the numbers extensively, and that certainly took some time period to go through it, looking at the actual WSIB costs, looking at the frequency for modified duty to accommodate, looking at the types of injuries and comparing ourselves with other jurisdictions. So we are very comfortable with our projection, and in fact, I think our projection may be conservative. We may have the option for actually preserving some further capital down the road. And I'm going to hold that one in mind as we look at it, and that's in particular for what we refer to as the bariatric units, for very large patients, those patients in excess of 550 pounds. So we may not require specialized vehicles for those patients moving forward on these, and that would save us some capital into the future as well. So we are very confident. We understand your concern, and we share that, and I know that we're going to be held accountable for it.
Chief, all the answers, Mr. Chairman, you've given have raised my comfort level enormously. Of course, this is first and foremost for the protection of our frontline paramedics, over 200, 250 of them, as well as for the patients that they so capably look after. So I'm very happy with the answers I've been given, Mr. Chairman, and can support 8.2 at the appropriate time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Doyle.
Yeah, it's a question, Mr. Chairman, to the Chief. Chief, for the single source with Roland emergency vehicles, this product is made in Canada, like we're not going offshore? Through you, Mr. Chair, the product is made in the United States. It's not a Canadian-made product. That's made only in one place in the world, that is in the U.S. It's imported into Canada, and Roland is the distributor for Ontario. American-made product, we can't get it nowhere in Canada? Through you, Mr. Chair, there is no product made in Canada of an equivalent nature. Okay. Thank you.
I can ask Councillor Green to take the chair. I know in agenda review we had the discussion, and I said to the Chief, I had this discussion with Joanne this morning, that anyone could be a good leader if they got all the money in the world. But a good leader is an individual that works within the financial constraints that are provided. Having said that, we know the transition that's taken place in the paramedic community. We were passed a lemon from the province of Ontario relative to what was being funded and the amount of paramedics relative to the service in our community. So it's taken a number of years to build a solid foundation, and we know that if you don't have a solid foundation, you're going to have not only a poor service, but you're going to have a lot of your frontline workers, whether it's WSIB or absenteeism, and it actually costs you more money with less service. So you need to have a solid foundation. So I guess my question through the chief, through the chair, is with all the changes we made, with the financial commitment and all the staffing commitments we've made, with a commitment, rightly so, for these stretchers, do you feel we have a solid foundation to work from now?
Mr. Chair, in response to that, yes, I do believe we have a solid foundation to work from. We've got the staffing put in place and approved by council that would move us forward. We have adequate capital in terms of our vehicles. You've set us up well in terms of our vehicles going into the next several years. This ends up changing it, and I look at these stretchers in terms of how we look after our staff and the process on it. I look at these stretchers and these devices as game changers. We're looking at a technology now to replace a technology that was new in the 1990s. And in the 1990s, it was a move forward from what we had in the 1970s and 80s. This changes the game for our paramedics, it changes the game for the future, and it changes the game for our city. So I'm quite confident in this platform moving forward.
And I should mention that the chief took time out of his busy schedule because logistics didn't work quite right for the agenda review. It came from Toronto, all the way from Toronto to sit down and talk to me about this report, and showed me a clip of the actual device in operation. So I want to thank the chief for educating me and giving me the opportunity to ask the tough questions and appreciate what he's trying to achieve, what his vision is. And certainly I see the representative of the union, and I can tell you that if you provide the right equipment to your workers, you not only will get a sense of pride, but you certainly get more productivity. So thank you very much for the report. I'll take the chair back. And is there any further questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Carried. Any against? Carried. Thank you. So motions, are there any motions? I see none. No's the motion, seeing none. General information. I could now call on Joanne Priel to provide a verbal update respecting Ontario Works Social Assistance Management System. SAMS.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll keep it brief. On June the 22nd, we're going to come back with a full report in terms of the where we're at with SAMS and the cost in terms of the transition. You'll know that the province did contract with PricewaterhouseCoopers to do a report on the transition on SAMS. It was very clear in that report that they never looked at the SAMS system, they just looked at the transition. But I can tell you in the report, which I have here, there was 4 comments in terms of transition positives, and there was 4.5 pages in terms of transition challenges. Just so that you know, we have had to reallocate 43 of our staff to working on the case management part with case managers to increase our case manager complement, because we were dealing with a caseload of 153 to 1, which is absolutely unmanageable. We moved several of our employment staff, our employment verification staff, and a team that we had to provide coverage. That caused a lot of angst with our staff. We have to move people. We've created 2 additional case management teams. That's going to cost us money. And we've created a team to provide some oversight, a business transformation team. So to sum it up, here is the transition plan that the province has. You'll see that it goes from March the 31st of 2015 to March the 31st of 2016. And I can tell you that in my impression is that the bars end at 2016, not because the work is done, but because that's the end of their fiscal year. I was at a meeting with my 47 other colleagues recently. Jillian was there with me on May the 5th. I can tell you that everybody, although you may hear conflicting messages, we were able to confirm that everybody is in the same situation as we are. We have now managed the chaos, so we're not in their emergency management sort of structure anymore. We've moved into a business transformation team oversight, but it'll be at least a year, I think, in terms of those staff that have been reallocated to try and bring some so that our case management function returns to it being whole, because right now what we're focused on is just making sure we take applications and that the checks get out. We're not making referrals to employment services. We're not making referrals to Helping Hands. We're not doing our employment fair. We're not doing a lot of things in terms of our case management function. So as I said, it continues to be stressful for staff. All I can say is that we've managed the chaos. It's not that things have necessarily gotten any better.
Thank you. Councillor Partridge.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you to Joanne. I mean, Joanne, I'm stunned, and I'm sure that all of you are as well. I have had a few of the staff that we've reallocated contact me, and this is devastating for everybody. So anything we can do to help with the process. But my question through you, Chair, at who is going to pay for this? I mean, at one point there was some discussion from the province that there were, monies coming forward, or they had put some money forward already. But now we're talking about an entire year up to, I think you said March 2016, and then it ends because the program ends. But I don't see that the challenges are going to end. So. Can you just give us any kind of feedback around the funding portion of it and what happens after that 2016 deadline, if you know?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So far the province has given us a little over $500,000 towards the cost of implementation of the system. The report that we're going to bring forward on the June 22nd meeting will clearly identify the costs that we think that the SAMS is costing us and will cost us for the remainder of this year. And I don't want to hazard a guess right now, Councillor Partridge, but it's going to be significantly more than $500,000. Yeah. And I did meet with the mayor and briefed him because he was anticipating a call from the minister. So that's one of the points, the key messages that I gave to the mayor, was that the province, when Julie and I were at the meeting, acknowledged that this transition plan was going to require them to make significant investments in their own staffing and transitional processes. So the point that I made and that I continue to make is that we have the same costs and issues in terms of our transition locally as well.
Yes, thank you for that, Joanne. And of course, we are one of 444 municipalities province-wide, all of which are being put onto this, or are now on this new system, is my understanding. I'll wait till the June 22nd, but I look forward to that report coming back, particularly on the cost. Thank you.
Thank you. And I just wanted to thank Councillor Samarula, who, when I came in this morning, wished me a happy birthday, although it's a bit premature. It's actually tomorrow. But having said that, the reason why I'm highlighting it because coincidentally the Canada Post hearing is at 2 o'clock tomorrow. So you know what my wish is. Anyway, we have outstanding business list. I need a motion, the outstanding business list as outlined in item 11.2A, B, and C. Moved by Councillor Partridge, second by Councillor Deval. All those in favour? Any opposed? Carried. Need a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Marula, second by Councillor Aidan Johnson. All those in favour? Carried. Thank you.
Yeah, we have